Come on. Love my girl. She looking good. Come on. One more.
Well, hi, all you beautiful boys and girls out there in TV land. It's your old pal Justin, back with the video that I promised at the end of my last video. The past little less than a week or so, I, for the first time, have been attending an event called the Great Digital Film Festival, which is put on by Cineplex through, I think it's Front Row Events, and it takes place over the course from January 30th to February 6th. Or 5th, sorry, which was last night. I had initially planned, as you probably remember from my last video, to see 8 movies. And that was my original goal. However, due to a variety of things, be it scheduling conflicts or what have you, I actually didn't end up seeing the original 8 that I intended to. But I did end up seeing 6 films. I saw Blade Runner: The Final Cut, The Monster Squad, Kill Bill Volumes 1 and 2, as well as Alien and Aliens, spaced out throughout from February 1st to the 5th. So I spent a lot of time watching movies. As you can see, I think I may be a little off on the dates there, though. And my initial idea was to simply talk about my history and experience and love for these films, coupled with the chance to see him on the big screen for the first time, which I do plan to delve on. But what is interesting enough is that is also the story of actually seeing these movies has also become kind of interesting, so I'm going to delve a bit into that. So, without further ado, I'll get into my first shot of the Great Digital Film Festival. Actually, you know what? I'll give a little bit of the background. What the Great Digital Film Festival is it's a week-long event that happens every year, end of January and beginning of February, in which several movies are selected. Both classic and contemporary, to be shown on the big screen digitally, unfortunately, as is the Great Digital Film Festival, so there wasn't any 35mm prints or anything like that, which is a little bit of a bummer, but it's not the end of the world. And I'd always meant to go, and there were years when they showed some great movies. One year RoboCop showed, and I had every intention of seeing it, but I ended up missing it for one stupid reason or another. The only time I've ever actually attended it was I saw one movie in 2013, or maybe it was 2014, and it would have been early 2014, very early 2014, and I went with my dad to go see the original Batman with Michael Keaton and Jack Nicholson, in kind of a father-son kind of bonding thing. But that's the only time that I ever attended any of the movies, and it was only the one, and I'd always really wanted to go, especially considering the prices are reduced significantly, and it's just a perfect opportunity to see these films on the big screen. So this year, funds coalesced, and the time coalesced, so I was finally able to take some movies in. And the first screening I attended was I caught it. Now, I wouldn't necessarily call it a double feature, because it's not like they were coupled together for any particular reason, other than it's probably just scheduling. That's just a time slot that worked best. I took in a double feature of Blade Runner: The Final Cut and The Monster Squad. Now, both movies I'd seen, and both movies I thoroughly enjoyed. However, I hadn't seen Blade Runner as many times as I'd seen The Monster Squad. And actually, I'd never even, truth be told, had never seen The Final Cut before. Or even the director's cut or any other version. The only version I'd ever seen was the theatrical version. So, I figured, that's a good opportunity, it's a whole new different version of the movie. I remember I would hear people talking about how much better it is than the theatrical version. There's people out and out shit on the theatrical version. And I never quite got that because I saw that's the version that I'd seen, and that's the version I liked. It's interesting because I own the box set with all versions of the movie, but I'd only ever watched the theatrical version. And so I went to go see it. It was a very cold day. That was on Sunday. Very, very cold. And I initially intended a bus there, but I missed my bus, so I had to take a cab, which was an extra about $20-some that I was not planning on spending, but nevertheless I did. And I get there, and I was planning on seeing both movies by myself. But I was like, oh, who likes seeing movies by themselves, right? And so I was like, okay, well, I don't know who I can really get at such a short notice, because I got there probably about 10-15 minutes before the first film started. And so I was like, okay, well, it's not really feasible to get anybody to join me for Blade Runner at such short notice. But I thought, okay, well, who do I know who likes the Monster Squad? And then I thought about it, and I was like, well, Britt really likes the Monster Squad. Both her and I, Britt is my sister, both her and I grew up watching that movie. So I call her on the payphone, and I say, hey, Britt, what are you doing today? And she's like, oh, nothing. And I say, okay, you should come down and check out the Monster Squad with me. It starts, I'm going to see the first movie, and it starts at, I believe it was 5:50 was when the Monster Squad started. I was like, yeah, you should come check out this flick with me. And, you know, a little bit hum and hawing, so she's like, sure. So I was like, okay, good. I won't have to see one of these movies by myself. And so I go over there, and I'm expecting, I mean, it's a Sunday afternoon, and it's Blade Runner. I don't know, like, if this movie's target audience would be, like, the usual general demographic of the theater. I don't think are people who, if a movie's on DVD, I don't think they're generally usually going to make the effort to go see it in theaters. I'm not calling them uncultured or unintelligent. It's just, I don't feel that the majority of the people who often go to the theater are the type of people where that really matters. You know, I think more people go for the spectacle to see the new releases, if they go at all. So I was surprised to see that it was a really good turnout. It wasn't packed, but there was quite a few people. It was selected seating, so I chose my seat ahead of time. And it was in this area where there's these seats, and they come up here, and then there's these, not quite the front row, but there's these seats right here, and then there's just open floor, and then there's the front rows on the other side. So there's an area where people can come, go up either alleyway, etc. And so I was sat right there, which I find is perfect because it's almost at the middle, and you can sit back, and you can basically just look forward. You don't have to look up too much or down or anything like that, which is where I usually like to sit. I usually like to sit there. That's generally and also you're guaranteed to have an unobstructed view because there's no one sitting in front of you. Oftentimes you can kind of stretch your legs out a little bit. I mean, of course, keep an eye out for people passing in either way so you don't trip them, but it's, in my experience, it's the most comfortable place in the theater to sit. Plus, I was sat right next to this handicap seat, which, you know, once the movie started, I realized no one was using it, so I could put my jacket there, you know, I could put my stacks there or whatever. It was like a perfect place. It was a really good setup. And so the movie unspools, it's not even on film, and I found myself really enjoying, even more so than I did when I initially saw it, which of course was a theatrical cut. I now, don't get me wrong, I still like the theatrical version. I still really like Blade Runner. But it was neat. The final cut does work better. It actually does work better without the narration. And it works better. I still, people say, oh, it's an unhappy ending. I don't feel as though the ending is unhappy. It's still, I mean, because really the ending of the theatrical version of Blade Runner is still ambiguous. Just as ambiguous as this. It's just a little more harsh because it doesn't have that extra, doesn't go that extra mile and show, you know, we don't know where we're going. It's just, he comes and he gets her. And, of course, there's that tiny little thing where he finds what's the word I'm looking for? The little unicorn made of paper, which apparently is supposed to suggest that Deckard may too be a replicant, although there's plenty of things that would disprove that. So I don't really believe. I don't take that because, but it's an interesting idea. But just the movie works so well. It still works even without the narration. It still works. It's really interesting, like ultra neo noir. For anyone who doesn't know, Blade Runner is about. It's set in the future in Los Angeles. The exact year escapes me. And the idea is that there's these like cybernetic organisms, like cyborg type things called replicants, that are made basically as slave labor to aid the development of colonies on alien planets. And they're made purely to be slaves. They're made with no purpose other than to serve as human beings. And they look exactly like human beings. And they're at times sometimes even given memories. But they only have a limited lifespan. They can only live, I think it's either 4 or 6 years. And so there's this group of renegade replicants headed by Rutger Hauer, who they come to Los Angeles from one of the alien worlds in the hopes that they can find Tyrell, a man who owns the Tyrell Corporation, who is the biggest manufacturer of replicants in the world, to try and find a way so that they can live. They want to be able to live. And Blade and Harrison Ford plays a cop named Deckard, who is a Blade Runner. And what Blade Runners are is they are people who they're kind of work for the police department, where they have to, because replicants are illegal on Earth. And so his job, and he's called upon because, doesn't work there, retired, but has no choice, and he has to retire these replicants. And what that means is literally kill them. And so he is charged with finding them, and it starts delving into a lot of interesting issues, like what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be alive? It deals with themes of playing God, and it really is a brilliant movie. It's one of I think Ridley Scott's best movies, and he's a really hit or miss director for me. And I really like the movie, so it was really neat seeing it on the big screen, especially a movie like Blade Runner, which is so visual and so big and epic in scope that it's neat to see it, on a huge screen, and you pick up little details too, and you pick up little things, and everything just looks more. I shouldn't say bright because it's a pretty dark movie, not necessarily dark in the subject matter, but dark in that it's always overcast and raining all the time, which I thought was a neat touch. And everything, as far as I'm concerned, everyone is at the top of their game. Harrison Ford is great. I really like Sean Young. Emmett Walsh is great. I love seeing Emmett Walsh. And if I put him in a movie, and it'll be instantly that much better because he's in it. And Edward James Olmos was neat. But I think, honestly, the real star performance is Rutger fucking Hauer, because he is amazing. Because he pulls off. And I've always thought he was good as. It's funny because he's not even really a villain. He's killing people, of course. That being said, I do believe that he is a byproduct of a greater evil, I think, is a good way to put it. And not even necessarily of an overt evil, but, in tampering, in playing God, in doing these things that you should be able to do. You sympathize with him, especially at the end. Spoiler alert. There's going to be spoilers in this entire video. Honestly, if you haven't seen any of these movies yet, stop this video right now and go watch them. Every single one of them. You might not be able to see them on the big screen like I did, but you'll still be able to see them, and they'll still be amazing. At the end, when he's talking about, and he knows his time is up, and he decides to save Deckard. He could let him fall, but he lifts him up, and it's really interesting because he could have killed him, but he knows his time up, so he wants to make a point. And it shows that killing is not completely what this guy was after, which is what makes him such a compelling character. And it just looks glorious on the big screen with all the flying cars and spaceships everywhere and the big lights. I don't know if it was all miniatures. I'm pretty sure there's probably miniatures and matte paintings, but it all looks just beautiful. I believe it was Sid Mead who was I don't know if you call him the creative consultant or the production designer, but the movie just looks beautiful, and seeing it on the big screen was just such an enriching and fulfilling experience that has me actually excited to watch the movie again. And so Blade Runner wraps up, and then I go outside and have a quick cigarette, and then I see my sister, and then we go in to see the Monster Squad. Now, the Monster Squad has always been a personal favorite of mine. It's not quite in my top 5, but it's just one of those movies that I can just compulsively watch. I enjoy it immensely. I have ever since I was a little kid, which is funny when people ask, "What, you didn't grow up with the Goonies?" And I was like, no, I grew up with the Monster Squad. It's like the Goonies, but for horror fans. It wasn't nearly as popular when it came out. But it has really developed a strong cult following. And it is a shame that it didn't really catch on and become as popular as the Goonies or something like that. Because Fred Dekker is a really talented director, and I feel that if that really took off... Because it's a shame that Night of the Creeps didn't take off, because Night of the Creeps is... easily, I love Night of the Creeps as well. I think I love both these films almost equally. But then the Monster Squad came off, and I think if either of them were a big hit, I think his career trajectory would have gone a lot differently. RoboCop 3 notwithstanding, I think he could have gone on to do a lot more really cool movies. And it's unfortunate that he kind of got dealt a shitty hand. I don't know if he'd even be watching this, but Mr. Dekker, if you are watching this, please know that I am an enormous fan and a great admirer of your work. Like I said, I doubt you're watching this. I don't even know why I'm saying this, but on the slight chance that there's some divine miracle that has you watching my video, please know that I'm an enormous admirer, and thank you for making these films. It's kind of a strange non sequitur, but... So, The Monster Squad, it was a different viewing experience, because that's a movie I've seen... Like I said, a dozen, maybe dozens of times. I've seen it, I don't know how many times. And so, it was really... But I hadn't seen it in a few years, so it was really neat. I know I shouldn't say none. I haven't seen it in a few years. I think I watched it late last year, before I even knew about this. And so, it was cool. Britt comes in, and then we just completely reverted back to our childhoods for the, 85 minutes or whatever. It's not a very long movie. It's just that movie still holds up and will always hold up. That movie is just so much goddamn fun. You just can't help but love it. And it's one of those movies, it's neat because it's filled with plot holes. Filled to the brim with plot holes. Things like kind of contrivances, things that don't make sense. And things that are just there to service the plot of the movie. But that's okay because you want it to, because you want this movie to continue. That is what's so amazing, I think, about this movie, is that it's not completely leave your brain at the door fun, but it's turn your critical thinking off. It is a movie you don't watch objectively. It's the enjoyment you get from it is not about any kind of scathing indictment of marriage or divorce or anything like that. This movie is just supposed to purely just speak to the kid in you, and especially to the monster kid in you. And that's what makes this movie so special. And it was just totally fun. It was a significantly smaller crowd, which I expected. I don't even know how many of the people who saw Blade Runner actually stuck around to see the Monster Squad. I really don't. I don't think it was that many, honestly. And so it was a smaller crowd, but amongst the people there, you could tell there were people who really liked this movie, who were there for the same reasons that we were. And we had a blast. That movie was so much fun. If you don't know, The Monster Squad is exactly like I described it. It's the Goonies, but with monsters. It's about these kids who are all part of this monster club, and they like hanging out in their clubhouse, talking about monsters, talking about monster movies, and they get mixed up in this plot where Dracula has come, and he's like gathering up all these other monsters. He like falls from a plane with like a crate carrying the Frankenstein monster, and there's like the creature from the not the creature from the Black Lagoon, not Karloff's Frankenstein, not Bela Lugosi's Dracula, not Karloff's the Mummy, you know, not Chaney's the Wolfman. You know, they couldn't make it look like the Universal monster movies because if I remember correctly, like Universal threatened a lawsuit, basically. So they had to tweak everything so it looked distinctively theirs, and it really worked in their favor. And basically these monsters want to get this amulet that will help them take over the world, or like basically end the world and bring on like 1,000 years of darkness, and etc., etc. And so the kids teaming up with the actually benevolent Frankenstein monster and scary German guy, if you've seen the movie, you know who I'm talking to, all band together to try and prevent this from happening and follow Abraham Van Helsing's diary, which was purchased at a garage sale for like 99 cents. I'm not joking. To fulfill the wishes in there and keep the world safe for another 100 years. Or 500 years. I can't remember exactly how long. And this movie is just a blast. It's like I said, it is unfortunate they didn't catch on. I think the reason why is because it's too profane and too scary. I mean, it's not an overtly scary movie, but there's like things that there's things that are too profane and too scary for really young kids. But it's not profane and scary and violent enough to be for adults. So it's a PG-13 rated movie, and I think that's kind of what suffered because it wasn't, for some reason, it didn't click with audience. At least not the audiences who were paying to go see it. But the movie became a massive hit on video, and it was just a blast. It was really a lot of fun going to that. And then, so that was the Sunday, and then on Tuesday, I believe it was a double feature of Kill Bill Volumes 1 and 2. And Megan was, but you'll notice that Megan is not here with me today. Unfortunately, she will not be making her debut. And that's because, unfortunately, due to scheduling conflicts and some health reasons, she was actually not able to accompany me to any of these films. And so I went to see, after work, I went to see Kill Bill Volumes 1 and 2. And now, so of course, I bought 2 tickets for each one. And I was worried that I was going to end up, wasting some tickets when I found out Megan couldn't come. But then I realized the first movie played, and it would be, with the time it was ending, it made it possible for my sister Britt, who of course works very early, so she wouldn't be able to stay for the whole thing. But she actually managed to be able to join me for Kill Bill Volume 1. And which was good. So there's only one ticket that ended up getting used, which is fine, honestly. Like, the tickets were cheap enough. It's not the end of the world by any means. So yeah, Kill Bill, I mean, you could also just call it Kill Bill, because let's be honest, it was one movie. It's one movie, and it was practically shot as one movie, I think. But of course, Kill Bill tells the story of the bride, Uma Thurman, who gets gunned down along with her new husband-to-be and their entire wedding party in a wedding chapel by the Deadly Viper assassination squad, which he used to be a part of, and of course their mentor Bill. And they think they kill her, but they don't. And she was pregnant at the time, so she wakes from a coma 4 years later, assured that her daughter is dead and her husband, her fiance is dead, and everyone is dead. So she takes revenge over the course of 2 movies. And I am an enormous fan of Tarantino's. Of course, the films are written and directed by Quentin Tarantino, whom I'm an enormous fan of. And I'm also an enormous fan of these movies. I watched them multiple times. Definitely Kill Bill Volume 1 I watched an insane amount of times. because when I saw that movie at like just the right moment when I was a teenager, and like the violence, the really visceral, over the top violence, the humor, like kind of dark sardonic humor, that kind of Tarantino style where the movie is just so cool. You know, it's that quintessential Tarantino where everything is just so cool. Everything just hit all the right notes when I initially saw it. And so, again, you know, like the Monster Squad kind of took me back to my childhood, this took me back to like my early days of being a teenager. And I just sat there and I just took everything in. And, you know, I noticed little things that I never noticed before. I'd never seen the movie on the big screen before, because when it came out in theaters, I was too young to go see it. So there were things I noticed I'd never seen on the big screen before. Mind you, I did go through the IMDb trivia page before coming to see it, so I did look out for this, but I never noticed it. But when Beatrix is going, whenever she's traveling anywhere and she hands someone a plane ticket, her name is on the plane ticket, even though it's bleeped out before when like Vivica A. Fox says it. I think, yes, like David Carradine says it and Daryl Hannah says it, but it's always bleeped out, but it's not blurred out on the ticket. So I looked for it, and you did see it. Also, in the scene at the House of Blue Leaves, on the soles of her shoes, it says "fuck you," like F-U-C-K and then a U. And I thought that was interesting, kind of off kilter, but it's just, the movie is just a complete onslaught of visceral, cartoonish violence. And I've always been a huge fan of Kill Bill Volume 1. I've always been a significantly bigger fan of Kill Bill Volume 1 than Kill Bill Volume 2, because I think when I initially saw the movie, and when I saw both movies when they were, like, on the first day that they were released on DVD, I saw both of them, respectively. And I think, because when it hit me at that time, the more over-the-top splatter of Kill Bill was what I was after at that time. But good thing that came of the screening of Kill Bill Volume 2, which Britt was not able to join me for, but of course she had to work early the next day, was I actually gained a much firmer appreciation of Kill Bill Volume 2. Now that I'm older and I take notice of more things, like music and different homages and things like that, Kill Bill Volume 2 is a really, really good movie. And I truly understand now that, essentially it is one movie, but both, there are things that can distinguish one from the other. And the first one, Kill Bill Volume 1, is definitely more of a chop-socky martial arts kind of movie, but Kill Bill Volume 2 plays out very much like a spaghetti western. And it has a lot of influences from Italian horror as well. The use of black and white, especially, of course, the eyeball violence, which was a nice nod to Lucio Fulci. And the music, he actually used pieces of music by Ennio Morricone. So that just shows how much he loves spaghetti westerns. And I think part of the reason why I appreciate it more now than I did when I initially saw it is because I, too, have now become a fan of spaghetti westerns. I love The Good and the Bad and the Ugly and Fistful of Dollars and movies like that. So I think I've now been able to fully appreciate it on that realm as well as being able to pick up on things that I might not have been able to when I was much younger. And so the movie ends, and then I brave the hellish cold. Like, it must have been, it was probably like minus 25, but with the wind, I swear it must have been like minus 35. This was on Tuesday, and it was just brutal. It was brutally cold. But I braved it. I walked across the parking lot, and I took 2 buses to get home, and I got home at like 1:45 in the morning. And I was bummed out because as far as I knew, I thought this was going to be my last night, because when I initially bought my tickets, I bought them all at once. And I didn't realize that I didn't buy tickets for the screening of Alien that I thought I did. I thought I bought them for Thursday night, but I had actually bought them for Monday early afternoon when I would have been at work. So I thought I had these 2 tickets as well that were a complete wash. Well, as luck has it, on the Thursday that was to be that screening, I give a call because I hadn't used the tickets. The tickets were untorn, and I said, "Listen, so I goofed and I bought tickets for the wrong date. I noticed you're showing these films tonight. Since they're not torn, can I come and exchange them for tickets for tonight's screening?" And lo and behold, he said, "Yeah, absolutely. As long as you have the tickets, that's no problem." So, brilliant, fantastic. So I actually get to see this one. And this was Alien and Aliens. So I make my way down to the theater, and I stupidly went in like 5 minutes before it was supposed to start. And I had to go to the box office first to exchange my tickets. And there was a lineup, and there was only 2 people there, and it was just taking forever. And so I finally got there, and then I get there, and I guess the person I talked to on the phone had left these vouchers for me so they could do the transaction. But all of a sudden they're not working, so I'm like, I'm waiting, because I know what they had been doing is they'd been putting, especially for the double features, like the Kill Bill double feature and the Alien double feature, what they did is they had one of my favorite film critics of all time, Richard Krause, which is very much why I'm dressed in the suit today, is because I thought I'd get fancy for this, since this was a big deal for me, and Richard Krause almost always wears a suit, so I thought I'd wear a suit too. And he had these little bits in the beginning. He did for the Monster Squad, and he did for the Kill Bill double feature, where he talks about it, gives some trivia, it has some clips, and it's a neat little thing. It makes everything seem that much more like an event, as opposed to just a bunch of movies that are playing. And so I didn't want to miss it. So finally I get my tickets, I book it, I run to there, and all of a sudden there's people... And there are people who are going to the same one that I am. So I'm like, okay, maybe they know something that I don't. And that's why they're not in such a huge hurry to get to the theater. And this was for Alien, of course. And so I'm like, okay, so I kind of ease my pace. And I kind of walk briskly to there. And I get in there just in time to see Alien on the screen, which is, of course, after the opening credits. So I'm like, oh my god, there are a lot of people here who seem just totally okay with getting in late. I wasn't okay. I sure as hell wasn't okay with it, but nevertheless, I got there. I didn't miss anything, and so I was very, very excited. And I hadn't seen Alien in years. Probably since before I moved back to the city, I hadn't seen Alien before. I mean, I'd seen Alien a few times before, but I hadn't watched it in about probably 2 or 3 years. And maybe even a little bit more. And so I was like, it was almost like seeing the movie for the first time. Because truth be told, amongst all the Alien movies, Alien, the first one, wasn't the one I watched all that much. Honestly, I compulsively watched Aliens. Largely because, like I said, I was different. I was kind of a different person at the time. I was younger. And so, what am I going to gravitate to more but the one with more action and more gore and more violence and more swearing and all that stuff? But so it was almost like seeing the movie for the first time, and I was completely blown away about it. Of course, as you know, Alien is set in the future, and there's these basically space truckers who are shipping some kind of mineral or ore or something like that, and they get a distress beacon from an alien planet, from an unidentified planet, which is later named to be LV-426. And so they, as per company policy, they have to go and they have to see what it's all about, and that's where the crew member named Kane, played by John Hurt, sees this egg which opens, and this organism comes out, and it melts through his faceplate, and it attaches to his head. And so they bring him back on board, and what ends up happening is this thing implants an alien in him, which incubates, and then pops out of his chest, and then runs amok in the ship. And now, I mean, these guys are just trying to get home, and I think that's something I'll get into in a moment. And they basically have to go through the ship, and it starts picking them off, and they have to basically fight it off, and one by one they end up succumbing to it. And what is so intriguing about this movie is it's basically a Roger Corman movie. Pretty much. It's, it's spaceships, it's aliens, it's violence, it's picking them off. But it's like this exploitation, like sci-fi Roger Corman movie, but if made by Ridley Scott, which means it's not going to be like Tura Satana and all these other people like that, B stars. John Carradine isn't in it, and Anthony Cardoza isn't in it. Sigourney Weaver is in it, and Tom Skerritt, and Ian Holm, John Hurt, Yaphet Kotto, Harry Dean Stanton. That's one of the really cool things about this movie, is it's such a... I mean, it's also a horror movie. I don't care what anybody says. It is a horror movie. It's a science fiction horror film. But it has these, like, top-notch actors, and the production design from H.R. Giger is just... Not necessarily, the creature design, and of course the design of the alien planet. Everything just looks beautiful, and it's absolutely gorgeous. And one of the things that I really come to appreciate about it, and always kind of, but seeing it on the big screen for some reason really drove it home, is the idea of the used future. I love the idea that there's these spacecrafts, and they have all these high-tech machinery, and you see, like, the Nostromo computer and the keyboard and all these flashing lights, and then there's an ashtray right there. They're all through the spaceship, and they're smoking cigarettes. Or they're cussing, they're talking about, bonuses and getting paid more, and they're grunting like people we know. Like, it's like one of the most unpretentious, like, science fiction films ever, and that's one of the things that I found myself really, really enjoying, was just that, the fact that they say these grunts, these literally, like, they're doing something that you can imagine someone doing now, just to, they're truck drivers. That's what they are. Or they're oil miners or something like that. There's these grunt, kind of grunts, but they're in this futuristic sci-fi setting, and that's what I really, really enjoyed more than anything. And just the suspense. It still makes me jump when Tom Skerritt is in that duct, and he looks one way, and he looks the other way, and all of a sudden the aliens are, and he goes, blah! That still made me jump in the theater, and I'd seen the movie 4 or 5 times, and that still made me jump. I started to see that it was, I think, objectively, honestly, I do think it's the best film in the series. I think it's the best made, and it just, everything it does perfectly. I still don't think I'd say it's my favorite. I think my favorite would still have to be Aliens, but objectively, from an objective standpoint, it is the superior film in the series. And so I saw Alien, and I just had such a blast watching it, and I went outside, and I was starting to get a little tired, because remember, it was actually, forgive me, it was Wednesday. Wednesday was the screening of Kill Bill Volume 1 and 2. So I didn't get a whole lot of sleep on Wednesday. And then I went to see this other double feature on Thursday, so I was getting kind of tired, but I went outside to have a cigarette, and then I was pumped to go see Aliens, because who wouldn't be? And I sat in a different seat, the same seat. Like, I didn't see, in the seats that I saw all the other movies, I didn't see Alien in, because I had to exchange the tickets at the last moment, so I couldn't get the seat that I had originally reserved. So I ended up sitting in that more front area of seats, which honestly worked okay, because I just sat and I kind of looked up a bit, but it was all right. That worked out well. But then I was able to sit in the seat that I usually did for Aliens, and the movie started, and already I was getting sucked in. And it's neat, these movies that you've watched on TVs and computer screens your whole life, actually going to, and then being able to see them on the big screen, you're just able to take everything in. But there was something immediately that started to bug me, and I didn't think it would. And I even realized this beforehand, is one of the big differences between most of the times that I've watched this movie at home and now, is that this was not the special edition director's cut. this was the regular theatrical cut. And so, I mean, I knew that ahead of time, so I was like, you know, it's still a movie. I've still seen this version. But what I didn't realize was how much of what I remembered was in that director's cut, as opposed to, I mean, it adds only about 18 minutes or something like that, but I all of a sudden I'm like, okay, so I know I'm not going to see the guys on LV-426. I'm not going to see Newt's dad with a face hugger on his face. But I was like, okay, well, when is the part that she is told that her daughter is dead? And I'm going on, and I'm like, oh my god, that must have been in the director's cut, which probably seems to some like whatever, but it was at a moment, and it almost kind of bummed me out a little bit, because I remember that scene being really powerful, especially at the idea of her literally just, her daughter lived a full life for the most part, and she literally outlived her. Like, the idea is so bizarre and so tragic, and I felt that, and it gives, when Ripley is talking to Newt, and she mentions something along the lines of, I had a little girl once, or something to that effect, it gives that scene that much more power, because you know that she's coming from this place of loss, and it has, you know, it plays a lot into why she's going back there in the first place. You know, she's got nothing to lose now. And so I think not having that in there, I don't want to say it hurts the movie, but it definitely enhances it. But the real tragedy was as I was watching it. Now remember, I was going on like 4 hours of sleep maybe, and I was staying up, you know, out in the theater and what have you, as I sat there and I started doing head snaps, and shamefully there was a point when I feel like I just completely fell asleep. Which just sucks, because there's so many scenes that I remember that I should have seen that I didn't. Namely, and this is one of the biggest tragedies of the whole thing, is I miss watching the power loader fight scene. There's a point when I just fell asleep, and when I woke up, the credits were rolling, or starting to roll, and it bummed me out so hardcore, because there's so many things I didn't get to see. And especially since I kind of went through a fair bit of trouble to actually be able to come and see these movies in the first place. So, as I'm sure you can imagine, it was kind of a bumming experience, but nevertheless, I got to see plenty of Alien action. I got to realize again, number one, how funny it is. How funny Bill Paxton is, particularly. He's the comic relief in that movie, and oh my god, is he funny. He really is, and just like the banter between the Marines, and again, going back to the used future, seeing them like smoke, like there's these cigarettes that look kind of strange. It reminded me of Blade Runner, in that there were these like cigarettes that looked a little off. You know, like when you see Sean Young, or the guy who is administering this test in the beginning of Blade Runner, you see them smoking those cigarettes. There's something that looks kind of strange about them, almost futuristic, and the same with a woman in the boardroom near the beginning of Aliens. And so it's just neat. For some reason, I like the idea of people, they're on this spaceship with like lasers and all this intergalactic and futuristic stuff, and they still smoke cigarettes. There's something I find really interesting about that. And I still had a blast, and of course, then I felt, you know, I may have fallen asleep during this one movie, but you know what? And my main goal with this whole thing, and what I'm really ultimately glad about, is I finally did it. It's something I've been meaning to do for so long, and this is the first time I actually went and made a go of it. I saw 6 movies within the span of a week at the theater, which seems strange for a guy like me to have never done that before, but I've seriously never done that before. This is the first time I've seen that movie in the theater, in the theaters, in that stretch of time. So it was a really, 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 I felt, honestly, I kind of felt like Brad Jones. You know, the guys, I'm going to see these movies, and I'm organizing it ahead of time, and I'm doing this video after the fact. And I did feel kind of like that. and the whole experience was really a positive one. If you're in the Winnipeg area and you are going to be this time next year, I highly, highly recommend checking it out. You'll see me there. And if you've still watched this video and you haven't seen any of these movies, I'm sorry, I probably ruined them for you, but I highly recommend seeing them, and definitely in your own areas. If you're not in Winnipeg, wherever you are, if you know your theater is showing like these interesting like contemporary and classic movies, go and check them out, because honestly, the more people that come to those kinds of things, the more times they're going to do it. So, sometimes even comes down to, oh, I'd like to see that movie in the theater, but I don't really know. Honestly, go and do it, because I think this is one of the best things going, and I love the fact that we're able to see these classic movies on the big screen, especially if you're people like, and maybe you're seeing it again on the big screen. Maybe you saw it initially, or I've seen it some other time, and maybe you've grown up with these movies, but I've never seen them in theaters. Honestly, do yourself a favor and go and check it out. So that wraps up this little video here. It didn't end up being as long as I thought it would, but I basically just kind of wanted to talk about my experience seeing these movies and give kind of a brief a little bit. I didn't want to go into big, full-fledged reviews of each movie, so I just wanted to cover major talking points, basically, and just basically talk about the movies, talk about my experiences seeing them, and things I like about them. So thank you guys for watching. If you're in, like I said, if you're in Winnipeg, check out the Great Digital Film Festival, or if they're doing it in your town or your city, something like that, go and do it. You'll be glad you did. And without further ado, boys and girls, thank you for watching again, and this is your old pal Justin, signing off.
Yeah, come on. Love my girl. She looking good. Come on. One more.
5 to 1, baby. 1 in 5. No one here gets out of